Hello and welcome to the Garden of the Black Roses. This is my next chapter in my original story, The Adventures of the Iron Wolves, Book 1, Alpha. Chapter 9, Cruelly Captured. Styx sat on a small hill with his eyes closed. His ears twitched, taking in every sound around him. In the distance, sky flowers created from magic burst like lightning in the sky. Magic fireworks, Styx thought, drawing himself deeper into the sounds around him. Where is she? Akira wouldn't let her out like Ian did with Miyako. Chie is a healer, not a fighter. He raised his hand and Veritas swooped down to land on his wrist. "Can you scout for me? Keep out of range of any hunters." Veritas sung to him in a few high notes before taking flight. She soared over the ground, her eyes feeding back information to Styx. She dipped and flew into the marketplace, singing to the other birds in their secret language about Chie. Seen a female human? She's able to heal and use magic. All humans look alike, they replied in whistles and clicks. But if you're looking for magic wielders, try the big nest on the hill. Their flockmaster gathers them there. Veritas flew upwards and circled again. What do you think, Master Styx? If I scout the palace, there's a chance I might get caught or shot down. Apparently there are no mages in the city. King Akira seems to want them all in the palace. Styx thought for a while. Fly around the castle. Don't go into the grounds. Try to look into at least their main hall. If there's any threat of capture or injury, come straight back. Veritas chirped and swooped towards the palace, her wings outstretched to catch the winds without too much effort on her part. Flapping her wings, she slowed her descent to land on the ledge of a large window that spanned from ceiling to floor. She tilted her head and looked around like an agitated pigeon. She jumped and took flight when a hand moved in front of her. "It's all right, little dove," a human called from the window, breadcrumbs in an outstretched hand. "I won't hurt you." Veritas, under Styx's orders, cautiously flew down and landed on the ledge again. The human patted her wings. "You're not a pure dove," she whispered, dropping the breadcrumbs for Veritas. "I can sense elf magic in you. Were you sent by Anima?" Confusion set into Styx. Why would Anima have elf magic? Is this Chie? He relaxed again and watched through Veritas's eyes. "Can you find out if that's Chie? She isn't wearing a red collar." He tucked his thoughts about Anima and elf magic away for later. Veritas hopped over the ground in a circle in front of the human, producing a delighted laugh. "What's wrong, little dove?" Veritas hopped up to her and pecked her skirt. "You still hungry?" She stood and went to the door. "Wait here, I'll bring you some more." Veritas looked around the room for the first time. From what she could tell, it was a female's bedroom. She flew and landed onto the dressing table. A silver bracelet similar to Anima's, but without the gems, sat barely visible under a red cloth. "Is that enough proof?" she asked Styx, pulling the red cloth off the bracelet. "I could get more if you need it." "That bracelet," Styx replied quietly, "could have been taken off her. As far as we know, Chie is supposed to be wearing a red collar now." And you got that information from Mariel, Veritas countered levelly. If it's true, it's old. But if it's not, it's misleading. She took flight and landed on the bed as the human returned. More information, right? If possible, Stykes replied with a nod. If not, bring me the bracelet and I'll do a tracking spell. Veritas flew back to the dressing table and pecked at the bracelet, flipping it onto its side, then slipping her head into it so it looked like a necklace. You recognize that? The human asked, slipping it off Veritas's head. It was given to me by my contractor. I don't wear it much because it interferes with my magic. She said she was going to make a more stable contractor ring for me, but I was taken before she could. She watched Veritas peck her hand, forcing the bracelet down onto her wrist. The more you act like that, the more I think you were sent by Anima. Try and get her to come with you, Stykes said quietly. Lead her here if you can. She seems to be free to move where she pleases. Many things about Anima he had learned in the past few minutes buzzed in his head. Apparently Anima could use elf magic, and she was also apparently called a contractor. Stykes knew that if he asked Anima directly, he wouldn't get an answer without offering something in return. He sighed and tucked them into the mental folder in his head labeled Anima. Veritas sung to the human, taking a hold of the sky blue sleeve of her kimono and pulled towards the window. You want me to come with you? The human asked, standing up and following Veritas. I can't leave the grounds. Veritas stood on the windowsill and tilted her head at the human as if asking why. Because King Akira binds us with collars, but for me, because of Anima's bracelet and my magical capacity, I have 4 bindings. She pulled back the blue sleeves to reveal 2 red bracelets, one on each wrist. Letting the sleeves fall, she lifted the skirt-like part of her kimono to reveal 2 anklets that bound each of her ankles. If I leave the palace, I will either be shot down by archers on the walls or strangled to death. Her voice a mix of fear and sadness. Come back, Veritas, Stykes told her slowly. This is going to take some thought. But in the meantime, I want you to take something to her so she knows we are sent by Anima. Veritas sung to the human before flying off towards Stykes. Anima laid, arms and legs spread wide, on the new double bed in Stykes and her bedroom. Rue and Miyako locked her in after she protested about going to safety. She lifted her hand and curled her thumb in. It has only been 4 days since Stykes left for Nakuro, and now Sukunia has taken advantage of our weakened state and infiltrated the Iron Wolf's territory. It's like they were waiting for him to leave. She clenched her teeth before releasing and let out an exasperated sigh. Surprised Copra and Oslo haven't broken through the wall yet as well. Her eyes began to clear, and things sharpened the more she focused on objects. She lifted her head at the sound of the door opening. Who's there? She asked, sitting upright. There was a low growl, and she was pressed back down onto the bed again. a heavy feline paw pressed against her chest. "Try not to crush her, Potentia," a low voice said softly, coming close to the bed. "I'm sure." The outline in her vision gave her a low bow with one arm swept out to the side and the other across his chest. Stykes' older brother. Anima, now knowing who it was, knew hiding her emotions was fruitless in front of this person. "You've risked your life coming here," she said simply, curling her fingers forward to press the first gem on her bracelet. "Miyako." She looked at the creature holding her down. "You're familiar?" Shiro nodded with a smile. "She's a spotted snow leopard. She's so beautiful and powerful that I called her Potentia, meaning power in elf dialect. Unlike Stykes, I wanted a familiar that was useful in battle. His dove would be eaten by my leopard in one mouthful." Anima sighed, her mind telling her not to say anything stupid, but her mouth did the opposite. "But Stykes, unlike you, wouldn't leap blindly into battle and need his soldiers to save him." Potentia's claws snapped out and sunk through her top to press against her skin, drawing little beads of blood. "Dear me," Shiro said sarcastically, sitting on the bed near Anima's head. "I would advise you not to say things like that. Potentia has a mind of her own and is incredibly loyal to me." He stroked the stray strands of Anima's hair off her face. "If you answer my question, I can promise that you'll still be here when Stykes comes back, from wherever it is he went." Anima narrowed her eyes at him. She could feel Miyako's presence coming up the hallway slowly. Our voices must travel out there. She mentally laughed at her next thought before she focused again on Shiro. I should remember to let Stykes know about that. "Where is the dimensional katana?" he demanded, his eyes hard and angry. "I have looked through this entire building, but in here. Where did he put it?" The skin on Anima's back felt cold, despite it being against the bed. Anima waited, prolonging the silence that was growing fast between them. "Where is it, Anima?" he replied, enunciating every word. "If it's not here, it's not here," she replied simply. The door behind him opened slowly, allowing Dusk, Rue, and Miyako to slip in. Stykes always carries a large range of weapons, so it might be the sword he always carries. I don't know what the dimensional katana looks like, so I can't say for certain. Shiro leaned forward, his eyes blazing, and placed his hand on her throat. "I'll force the answer out of you if I have to." Potentia took this as her cue, and raised her other paw to scratch 3 deep lines over the back of his hand. Blood flowed freely over Anima's neck and into her hair. "Collar form!" Anima's eyes widened as the blood solidified and locked tightly around her neck. Dusk ran forward and pulled Shiro off Anima, Rue and Miyako following just a step behind. "Anima's guards," he said with a laugh. "You're a little too late." Potentia moved, letting Anima sit up. "You will obey my every word. Order your guards off me." Anima's eyes, dark and dull, looked at the 3. She swept her arm to one side, her usual angry dismissal. "Leave this room at once." Miyako moved away, her contract with Anima forcing her to obey. She drew her bow and aimed it at Shiro. Dusk and Rue stayed where they were. "You can't order me," Dusk said to Anima, making sure it was clear to Shiro as well. "I'm one of Styx's personal guard. He ordered me to look after you, therefore his order overrides yours." Rue said nothing, instead planted his feet and renewed his grip on Shiro's wrists. Her eyes narrowed, and she moved to the side of the room that was originally hers. Reaching her dresser, she drew her rapier and held it in front of her. "Move now, or I will run you through." She darted, as if weaving through many trees, towards Rue, Dusk, and Shiro. Time slowed. Rue turned his head just as Anima lunged for his throat, his eyes meeting hers. She ran past, her rapier scraping his cheek, her eyes twinkling for a second. Rue looked at Dusk, who nodded once. Anima spun and flicked her sword, making a swish sound. She flew at them again, her rapier raised high above her head. Dusk and Rue moved, pulling Shiro between them into Anima's path. Leaping up, she moved her rapier down through the air. It whistled before cutting deep into Shiro's left shoulder, dragging deeply across his chest to his right hip. She spun and thrust her rapier deep into his chest, and stopped moving. Styx stood in the marketplace of Figura City when he felt the katana on his hip and his jacket both vibrating. Looking around quickly, he darted down an alleyway and drew the katana from his right hand. Elven scripts flowed over the blade brightly, snaking up his arm and burning deeply into his skin. He yelled and dropped the katana, his left hand holding onto his right arm in pain. The script flowed over his arm before settling as a band around his upper arm and wrist, looking like a black tattoo of Elven script. "Looks like your brother's dead," Veritas said to him, perching on his left shoulder. "Either that or he's so severely injured that he can no longer claim the sword and scroll." Styx leaned back against the wall and slid down to the floor, pain still very fresh in his mind. "You need to touch the scroll. Better to get all the pain over and done with now." Styx nodded, much to his dislike in agreement. Reaching into his jacket, he drew out the scroll with his left arm. Pain shot up his arm. Styx forced himself to place the scroll back. The script swirled over his arm before settling into a script tattoo that started on the back of his hand and spiraled up to his elbow. His eyes focused on Veritas briefly before passing out. She jumped down onto the grip of the katana and tilted her head to the sound of marching hooves before taking off to watch overhead. "Another magic wielder," a soldier said, looking down at Styx's unconscious form. "He doesn't seem human, though." His partner looked from Styx to the tattoos on his arms, to the katana, then back to Styx. "An elven sword mage, if I'm not mistaken." He picked up the katana as a test. It melted into a tar-like substance before moving and reforming in the sheath on Styx's hip. Definitely a sword mage. He reached into the saddlebag of his horse and drew out a red collar. "We'll take you up to the palace for the king." He clipped the collar around Styx's neck. He and his partner jumped in shock as the collar seeped into his skin. "Maybe because he's elf-born?" the first soldier said, holding his hand out for 4 smaller cuffs. "Master Shiro said these work for even elf-born." Clipping the bracelets and anklets onto Styx produced the same effect. The soldier scratched his head before picking Styx up and throwing him onto the horse. "We'll chain him up in the dungeons until the king tells us what to do with him." Veritas swooped down and grabbed the necklace from around Styx's neck, snapping the chain and flying up into the sky. The soldiers watched her land on the roof and placed the necklace with 2 rings down and pecked at them. Shrugging their shoulders, they continued on. Veritas pulled the larger of the 2 rings from the broken necklace. "I'm sorry, Master Styx." She held the ring firmly in her beak and flew down quietly to land on Styx's lower back. She looked at the soldiers walking in front, leading the horses, then at Styx's hand. "I can get it on his right hand. It's tangled in the reins. I won't have to fly. Easier for me to get it on properly." She hopped up and slowly eased the ring onto his ring finger, keeping a wary eye on the guards. She pulled it down hard, leaving scrapes over his finger from her beak, until it sat firmly lodged on his finger. "You'll be able to talk to Anima soon. Be patient." She took flight to the roof, picking up the broken necklace with the remaining ring in her talons, and flew off towards the Iron Wolf's territory. And that's it for this chapter. This story, I can tell it is one of my older stories because the writing, the wording, and the writing. Oh my goodness. That's okay. If I ever finish this story, I'll probably go back and fix up the first book. I am tired. I have night duty tonight. I'm tired. But yeah, as always, make sure to like, comment and subscribe. Let me know what you think, and what you want to see more of. Oh, and that reminds me, the diamond dots that's in the background for this series in particular is called Celtic Wolf Guide, if you haven't noticed by the title. I have finished the koi. I have recorded videos of me finishing the koi, so those will pop up with the remainder of the Ragnarok online story. Some of the Magic of Moonlight chapters, and if there's still more of it left, the Yokai Tamer story, or stories, because there's 2 of them. But yeah, the last video will have like a 1-minute kind of show of the full piece completed. But yeah, I will see you in the next one, and as always, let your imagination run wild. Bye for now.